Hello and welcome to the KnolShare with Dr. Dave podcast. I am Dr. Dave A. Cornelius, affectionately called Dr. Dave, and I am your host. So, today, my guest is Dillon Treacy. Dillon will share his experiences, insights, and some of the rhythms that have propelled him to the mountaintop of musical achievement. Dillon, welcome to the KnolShare with Dr. Dave podcast and get into your mountaintop series.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. And so, there's some backdrop, a backstory on this because I have to tell everyone that, when I met you for the first time, I think you were about 6 months old. And
Sounds about right.
yeah, about right. Yeah. And so your parents was visiting me in Chicago, and I had a home studio, and there was a drumstick that you were just wrestling to get, man. And I said, just give it to him. Let me clean it and give it to him. And I gave you that drumstick, and I told your parents, your son is going to be a drummer, and that's the prophecy, right? And it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like
No,
we're like
yeah,
realizing the prophecy right now.
yeah, yeah,
You are realizing the prophecy, right? you
yeah.
know and I know they're like super proud of you. So um and so am I. I
Thank you.
actually put out I had a little snippet of video of what I came to see you in Phoenix when
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
playing with Amber, and
hmm
so I dropped that out in LinkedIn, and hopefully she wouldn't beat me up too much about it.
I
you
don't
know.
even know if she's on LinkedIn, to be completely honest.
Okay, good, good, good. So when I drop it in the other channel, just to showcase the fact,
Yeah, yeah.
she could come back and scream at me. How's that?
Sounds good.
so so let's just jump on in, man. It's like I
Yeah,
like to get started with people, singing or reciting, some spoken word that inspiring them right now in this moment. So I'm asking you to bring that as a worldwide musician.
yeah. So as far as like things that do inspire me on a whole, I really don't listen to lyrics that much on the first listen. It's more about the rhythm and the music that's happening, and it's not until like maybe the 10th or 15th listen that I actually like recognize what is being said in the song. Um, but there is one song in particular that I've kind of been obsessing over for the last year or so. And we were speaking earlier before we went live, but it's this record called "Barely Breaking Even." Um, and it's by this guy named Leroy Burgess, who I've become a huge fan of. And he kind of inspired and started. I mean, a lot of musicians would probably say like he created the boogie movement of like
Yeah.
the early '80s. And that's been a style of music that I've been like really getting into over the last couple of months. Because to me, it's just like well, I'll probably talk about it later, but it's just a style of music that I really enjoy. And this song in particular, um, obviously love the music and love the sound of it. And then it was within like two or three listens that I actually was like picking up on the lyrics, and it's actually just like the most freelance musician anthem I've ever heard in my entire life. So I'll just read like the first couple of lines from it right now. So the first verse just goes, "Just got my paycheck and I'm on my way home. Between the rent and the phone bill, it's nearly gone. But I try to make ends meet that just don't want to meet. I can't complain, but somewhere I'm getting beat. Maybe it's the system, maybe it's the cost of living. Every single weekend, I never know where the money goes. Still, I'm always giving, and I'm just barely breaking even. I've got to get some for myself. Just breaking even, Steven. I've got to get some for myself." Um, so it's just like we grinding, we doing everything that we need to do, and then the weekend comes and we hang out, party, and all of a sudden it's like, where'd it go?
Yep.
But at the same time, it's like the love for what we do that keeps us going. So it's kind of like not even a big deal in the first place that we're still broke, but it's like, yeah, but we're having fun and like doing exactly what we want to do. And it's kind of just been like a weird mantra that I've been playing over in my head, being like, yeah, you broke, but are you having fun? You doing what it is that you want to do, and are you propelling yourself forward to make sure that you can constantly keep on doing what it is that you want to do? So that's my little lyrical snippet.
Hey man, it's all about the passion, right? I mean, if you
Hmm.
love what you do, man, it's a beautiful thing, you know. But let's talk about you and
Yep.
introduce yourself to people. I call it an elevator pitch, but
Right.
you choose.
Yeah. So yes, my name is Dillon Treacy. I've been a resident of New York City for coming up on 13 years now. I am a drummer. That is like my main work, but I've dabbled in production and other things. But I really just like playing drums and interacting with musicians and creating. My main thing is people always ask me like, "Well, what style of music do you play? What music are you into?" And my go-to answer is, "Can I cuss on here?"
You know, a little bit, but it's
Okay,
up to
okay,
you.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
up
yeah,
to you. It's your
yeah, yeah.
thing too.
It's not like bad cuss words. But I go anything that can shake your ass,
Yeah.
and then they laugh and they're like, Well, what does that actually mean?" And I'm kind of like of the as a drummer, kind of our not our main job, but if you look at just like the history of drums and how they've been um, applied to human existence and culture, it is always a thing that is used for a celebration of anything. And then especially in my kind of like soul searching, I had to look back at like the fact that my heritage does come from the African diaspora, and I had to look back at like, well, what were we doing back in the day with drums? And it was always just used as a celebration for anything that was happening, and life, death, birth, and then with drumming came dancing and singing. And my whole thing is that if I can do what I do on the drums that causes you to celebrate something, either by moving your body or having some sort of like slight visceral reaction, then I've done my job. So that's kind of like what I try and do every time I sit behind the drum kit and play music. Um, because I not only am I doing it for other people, I have to do it for myself because
Yeah.
sometimes I can lose sight on what it is that I'm actually doing. And as long as I kind of just keep that as what people like to say, the North Star and whatever, it's like that kind of just keeps me going and keeps me interested all the time because there's always new ways of figuring out how to make that work in certain musical contexts. So,
Yeah, but one important thing that I want to call out is that you went to NYU too, right?
mhm.
I know as a drummer, you're probably like, well, yeah, that was important, but
Yeah,
drumming
I,
is the thing.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I went there for jazz performance and definitely had an interesting experience with that. That yeah,
yeah.
we can talk about if you want.
It's up to
If you
you,
want to
man.
ask, if you want to ask certain questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. But I definitely had a interesting experience with overall jazz pedagogy
Yeah,
and how music education works. And I have a lot of thoughts about that. But I would say that my main education was actually just living in New York City.
yeah,
From 18 to 22, where yeah, you had to go to class and like housing was taken care of through the school and everything, and I could just kind of experience what I chose to experience, and it was going to gigs, jam sessions, hanging out with random people, just saying yes to everything and doing those things.
all right. I hope you haven't frozen for too long and you're gonna come back.
Okay, yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi is a little bad. Um,
Okay.
that that it was living in New York City that was probably as much, if not more, of an education than just going to NYU in general.
I could feel that. So let's
Yeah.
talk about your biggest artistic inspirations. What are some of those?
Yeah. Definitely George Clinton of Primal Funkadelic. Um, that that kind of I make a joke where it's like he was my best friend in high school because it was the only music I listened to, and sometimes I feel like everybody has that one year where you just like didn't have any friends. You're
Yeah.
just like and I distinctly remember it was like my sophomore year of high school, and I just was on the internet, sat in my car, just listening to Parliament Funkadelic all the time, and speaking, and when it comes to like, not only is the music incredible, but the lyrics really kind of educated me in how I want to feel when I experience music, and
Yeah.
how I want to feel when I experience life. And he's got some. Sorry, my camera is all weird. He's got some interesting things to say, but uh, I still go back to. I was watching an interview of his on Arsenio Hall from like 1991 or 93 or something like that, and Arsenio was like, "Yo, so what is the definition of funk?" And George goes, "Well, you zoom out from this whole city that you're in, to the planet, to the solar system, to the Milky Way, to everything else, to the edge of the universe, and you look at where you are in that whole scheme of things, and you realize how infinitesimally small you are, and how nothing that you do affects, whatever is happening out there in a weird sort of way. So all you can say is just like funk it, and
Yep.
just do you, and hearing that was like mad liberating for me, as like a 15, 16-year old. And also like really inspired just the idea of like Afrofuturism in a way too. And kind of like speaking of a future that doesn't exist, but you're trying to make it exist with what you have right now. I think it was a really important thing for me to consume, in those formative years. So yeah, Parliament Funkadelic's a big one for me. I would also say like drumming wise, John Bonham of Led Zeppelin kind of just
Yeah.
like really embodied the way that I love to play drums. Just like bombastic, fills up the room, but there's so much space and care, um, to the music that is happening around it. Um, and I think my love for Bonham and his approach in drums kind of influences the type of music that I do like and listen to. Um, I like things that have there's certain roles in the songs that kind of play off of each other but aren't on top of each other, and then they fit together to create this like amalgamation of pocket and groove and just that type of thing. And it falls in line with like hip hop and certain jazz artists and things like that. So yeah, I would say Bonham, Parliament Funkadelic are like my big inspirations for sure.
So, when we look at, cultural heritage, how has
Hmm.
that really influenced your artistic, expression? I know you talk about,
Yeah,
Funkadelic,
right.
and John Bonham. What else
Yeah,
influencing your artistic expression?
yeah. I would also say like, um, you mean like other artists, or just like other things in life that do happen?
Well, I mean, it's like you as a drummer, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
knowing you're a black man,
right,
that's
right.
part of your cultural heritage, but also
Yeah,
growing
yeah,
up in Wisconsin,
yeah,
that also would give you another
yeah,
cultural
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, definitely the idea that I was surrounded by people that listened to music that I had no idea existed and did not consider to be things that I enjoyed. But then at the same time, with the music that I did like, it actually, let me rewind. That's not what it is that I want to say. Huh. Yeah. Okay. Another thing. I really grew up on a lot of like 60s, 70s, 80s, R&B soul music.
yeah.
Yeah, Prince was playing in the house all the time. Like I said, so was Parliament, and just like anything that was on the radio in that era was played in my house. And then when I really got into hip hop later on, uh, to the it was Kanye West who is really disappointing us now. But he definitely inspired me a lot to get into sampling, because when I heard the hip hop songs that I liked, I was like, wait, I actually know what the sample is. So then it kind of just like fed into this idea of nerddom, because I really do like history a lot, and I like the context in which certain things came out and how they all fit together. And so then when I hear a sample, then I'm like, oh, what is that sample? And then I'm like, oh, well, who played on that song? And that person played on that thing. And I create this whole web narrative in my head of like how it all works out. And that just kind of like informs this greater story that I really just enjoyed knowing a lot of the time. So that's a huge thing. D'Angelo was a big deal for me when I was in college, and just understanding what stillness and pocket and groove was, in a way that he took everything that I had known and loved within music and did a new thing with it,
Yeah.
because he nerded out about it the same way that I do. And to see kind of like your own mental vision of what music can sound like manifested within another artist, like that is an incredible thing. And yeah, and I mean, I know I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but like Jay Dilla obviously was a huge person of inspiration for me. And then I would also honestly say too, um, "Bitches Brew" by Miles Davis like blew my mind when I first heard it. Just the idea of sitting somewhere and just, it's almost like mantra music, just like for 15 minutes just doing the same thing, and just like there is talent in not changing up what it is that you're doing,
Yeah.
and to keep it going and keep it good, which then turns into, now my next true love is like, I really just like disco and boogie music. I could hear the same beat for like 20 minutes, and it's like, well, if it's hitting, then screw it, I'm just gonna keep on dancing to it, and it's just like things like that are really inspiring to me. Because I think that the world's in a really interesting spot right now, and I think we're all thinking that we have to do so much, and I don't know if we know how to relax a little bit and just like
Yeah.
be within ourselves. And I find that dancing in a club to a song that lasts for 15 minutes is very calming for me, and kind of just like makes sense of the world, which I know is not what a lot of people would feel, but it's what makes sense to me.
Hey, it just reminded me of some of the underground stuff that was happening in the 80s, like when I lived in Chicago and I would
Yeah,
travel to
yeah,
New York and stuff like that. I would, have those type of
yeah,
experiences. But let's talk about obstacles that you faced in your art, right? And
yeah.
then how have you navigated around those?
I mean, honestly, my biggest obstacle is myself.
Yeah.
That's probably, the main thing. I would say that being a not only being a musician, but just being a freelancer in general, is you have to really get past some of the bullshit that you've created in your head, that does stop you. Like, and I go. What's so funny is I've been doing this shit for so many years, and I still run into the same problems every single year. Just being like, telling yourself that you can't do something, or invalidating your experience, or people talk about the whole imposter syndrome, and I like to say, like, sometimes you just gaslight yourself into thinking that you're not worth the things that it is that you want to do. And it's not like anybody's told me that I can't do something. Like, the obstacles aren't the powers that be. I mean, that is an obstacle, but what it really is just like myself. I'm the obstacle. I'm the one that has prevented myself from doing what it is that I want to do. But then at the same time, I get presented with opportunities where I have no right being there, as far as like pedigree or what it is that I've done beforehand. But I just kind of like fake it until I make it, and then all of a sudden I have a new skill set and it works. And just being like confident in yourself and taking everything that you've done in the past to make it make. What was the
No,
last part
I
that you
mean,
got me on?
no, I mean, no, I mean, I get that, in terms of dealing. And so I have a simple statement for you is welcome to being
Yeah,
human. We all go through it,
right.
you
Exactly.
know, even at my
Exactly.
age, I still go through like
Yeah.
a lot of that kind of stuff. Um, so let's talk about a project that, that's really holds significant personal meaning for you.
Yeah. I would say that, so I have my own band, Alto Palo, which is like me and three of my best friends. We've known each other for about a decade now, if not more. And that when we first started becoming friends, I distinctly remember this memory. Is It was the first time we ever played a gig together, and we had a mutual friend that needed a band, and I knew one of the band members. He's one of my best friends, and then I knew the other band member peripherally, and then the third one I had no idea who this was. We only met during rehearsals, but when we played this show, it was one of those like, oh my god, this is what this is supposed to feel like. Like
Mhm.
this is that joy that you're supposed to have when you play music. It was as if we had known each other forever when we played that first gig. So that was an inspiring thing to have happen, because I look back at that moment knowing that it can be done. The whatever version of bliss that you have in your head of being a musician or just being alive can be there. And so I use that as like a grounding point of like, well, if I'm not feeling like that, then I don't know if this is something that it is that I want to do, you know? And a lot of the times I can feel that way, but I've gotten to the point now where even if it's the worst music playing in front of 5 people, I can still find an opportunity to make it the best gig of my entire life. But that's gone through years and years of, like, trial and error of making sure that, I'm yeah, it took time to get to that point. So, yeah, that band, very important to me. We're kind of on a hiatus only because all 4 of us are, like, doing really good things individually. And then as far as, like, other projects, my main source of income at the moment is touring, as a musician, and so I do play with a lot of different artists all the time, and, the roster changes year to year, but it is the idea of traveling to new city every single day, to even a new country every single day if, you're touring in Europe, that experience in itself is something that I thrive off of. I love the idea of, you know, I'll have a gig in Los Angeles and have my idea of what LA is like and interact with those people. And then I drive to Phoenix and I'm like, huh, this is particular in a way, very warm. And then I go to Texas and I'm like, wow, barbecue. This is delicious. Entirely different vibe. And then you go to New Orleans the next day, and
Yeah.
then you party in New Orleans, and then Miami, and all of a sudden you just within 2 months you just experience all of America, which like is a thing that not a lot of people can say that they've ever done. I feel really, really lucky and blessed to know that I've traveled through uh, 46 of the 48 continental US states. I've either stayed or play a show in all those states. Um, I have traveled and performed in, I would say, about 20 countries now. Um,
And you're really lucky to be able to go to all those countries and bring those bring your skill, for the world to really experience you. So I know I get to hear some of those stories from your dad, and I hope you come back pretty soon from um, being frozen.
Hello. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
All right, all right, all right, all right. I,
Yeah.
I was about to go do some commentary until you
No,
come
no,
back.
no, 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 no. Yeah, it's dang Wi-Fi. The problem with living in Brooklyn sometimes is that they don't get you the good Wi-Fi if you live in a neighborhood that they don't care about.
Yeah,
And so I have like the worst version of Wi-Fi you could possibly have, and it's literally because there's nothing else that exists over here.
yeah.
So there's that. But as I was saying, I've traveled to about 20 countries. All over Europe. I've been to Abu Dhabi. I've been to Tokyo, Beijing, Lima, um, and it's things like that that is also as important to me as being in any sort of project. Like that to me is also a project, because it's like, yeah, I can't even imagine what life would be like if I didn't have those opportunities, and
That's
and and how like I
no,
think about the world.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun, not to sound corny, in my mind just popped in like I've been everywhere, man. That song, you know.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Yeah, that song. But let's talk about how do you use art to address like social issues that we're facing currently, right?
yeah. I mean, I think that's a really so I think about this a lot because I know that I am a drummer. So I can't really do much on the vocal end of or lyrical end of saying things like that. Um, I also live in a very like progressive bubble um, as far as politics go. Uh, so even if I do anything, it's probably going on dead ears because everybody gets it.
Yeah,
But then also at the same time, when you travel, especially when you go on tour, like, look, don't get me wrong. I would love to have political conversations with everybody on the planet all the time, and I have done that. And a lot of that happens not on stage, but when you just meet a random person at a bar after the stage. And I remember one time I was playing a music festival in Cheltenham, UK, which is like horse country in the middle of nowhere in England. And this is like 2017, and this woman just comes up to me and she's like, "Oh, you're American?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh, how do you feel about Donald Trump?" And I was
oh,
like, "Oh, yeah, not good. This is really bad." And um, she goes, "Oh, I feel like he can maybe do some interesting things." I was like, "Well, what about you? How do you feel about Brexit?" She goes, "Oh yeah, I voted leave." And I was like, "Huh, okay, interesting." And she was like, "Yeah, I just feel like England's not English enough anymore." And I was like, "All right, so you just word. Okay, so that's what everybody's feeling right now. Cool." And so like that is like a version of that. But I also part of me is just like real tired about talking about social change
yeah,
because especially like living in New York, and I just remember like the George Floyd protest during the pandemic, and a thing that really irked me was being at these protests and seeing a bunch of people kind of using it to promote their own agenda about a thing that actually wasn't even being talked about, and a lot of like virtue signaling and social media activism that is creating awareness, but what are you doing for yourself type of thing. And look, other people can feel like that is what they want to do. I just feel like I'm better at promoting how I want the world to be by how I just exist in my day-to-day life in the first place.
yeah,
um, because that I actually have control over. People could be watching this and be like, "Well, you're not on the front line, so you have no right to say about anything whatsoever," or like, "I don't see you at the protest," and because I mean, there's this person who is not who has AIDS, who is not taking their AIDS medication until the theater company that they work for is calling for a ceasefire against Gaza, and like that is some level of activism that I'm like, "Oh,
wow. Yeah, just as we wait for you to come back in with your Wi-Fi. Yeah, that is a, a certain level of activism that many of us probably would not go through to get there. But I could just imagine the passion that someone would have to really want to step in and take some of those actions because they believe in something that much. They have that great degree of compassion. um so I could completely get what that is. And so I mean that's something to for all of us to think about when we're thinking about using what we have to deal with some of the social issues that may impact us. And it seems like Dylan's connection just got disconnected, and I'm sure here he comes. We're going to add him right back to the stage, because we're waiting, and in between, I was just giving commentary to wait for you to get back here.
yeah." Yeah, I switched over to a personal hotspot because I don't want to deal with my Wi-Fi cutting out anymore, and this is a lot more reliable. So, yay.
There
Um,
you go. So,
uh,
so let's. We can either pick up where you left off
yeah,
talking about that person, and the sacrifices they've made, or we could jump
right.
in to start talking about, you know, the type of advice that you may have for other young artists trying to break into the industry. It's up
Yeah,
to
yeah,
you.
yeah. I'll just finish by saying like, there's a lot of people doing a lot of important things. My version of social activism um, is honestly through making you forget about the fact that there are problems by me
Yeah,
playing music. That's kind of like my whole thing, because at the end of the day, if we just like take a step back to relax and actually look at the big picture of a lot of things, um, I personally believe that a lot of us are actually angry at the same problem. And I don't think a lot of us are understanding what that main problem is. And that is, um, I think, a thing that is very interesting about the world that we live in, where the powers that be like to make people really mad at each other for issues that they don't need to be mad at, because you should be mad at the man, if you will. So yes, that is my whole thing at the end of that. As far as people breaking into the industry, when I visit my old high school, people are always like, "Oh, where should I go to college?" And what I always tell them is honestly go to the city that you want to work in as a
yeah,
musician. You know, if you want to work in Chicago, then go to school in Chicago. If you want to work in New Orleans, go to school in New Orleans. If you want to work in New York City, you can go to New York City. It's expensive as hell. You know, you can go to like Purchase and still meet some really good musicians there. If you want to work in Los Angeles, then go to Los Angeles. So, and I say that because in my experience, I learned more about the music industry and getting into it and getting gigs and performing from just being in New York. I know we talked about the NYU thing in the past, but I did not get a single gig opportunity in my professional life from any of my professors at New York University in the jazz program. And a
I
lot of that is
can see
because,
that.
yeah, a lot of that is because I chose not to pursue a career in jazz performance. I chose to go the more pop route. Um, but if you want to work with producers in LA, then just go to LA. You don't have to try and learn that in New York City and then try to move out and everything like that. Like, because in order to break into the scene, you have to be a personable human being that has ego but also understands that other people exist. It's just like making friends. That is the easiest way to get into the industry, because at the end of the day, everybody expects you to be a good musician, 'cause that's why
Yeah,
you're here, you know? Like,
yeah,
I think about it where it's like, okay, I understand why I don't get certain gigs, because I might not play that type of way, or that's not the type of drumming that I do. That's fine. But for everything else, everybody's like, no, of course you can play. It's just like, do you play the way that I want to, and do I like to hang out with you?
yeah.
And I think a thing that me and my friends used to talk about in college was there's a triangle, and
Hmm.
if two of those three things in that triangle are fulfilled, then you should like take the gig. And the thing was money, hang, and music.
Yeah,
And it's like, if the music and the hang's good, but the money's bad, take it. If the money's good and the hang's good, but the music's bad, still take it. And if the music's good and the pay is good, but the hang is kind of bad, you should definitely take it, because everybody got to get their check.
yeah,
Um, but it just is one of those things where the relationship that you have with the people in the band and the people that you're working with, that sticks to other people, you know and it's the same thing with like any other workforce. That's the funny thing. Like,
yeah,
that's just like being a human.
yeah,
Just be good to others and understand things and just listen, like, it's a lot of listening, and it's a lot of being patient. Because yeah, if you want to be a musician, I expect you to practice and know how to play whatever it is that you're playing. um But yeah, it's just like hanging out with people. Don't stand in the corner and being like, "Oh, I'm too good for this," or like buy somebody a shot. Be like, "Yo, I really like your stuff." Be like, "Hey, can we hang out? You want to get coffee or something like that?" Like, it's just those types of things. And people will always remember those moments. And then if your playing's good, then they're also going to remember the playing. But
yeah.
it's just that.
I mean,
Basically, don't be a dick.
yeah,
That's the,
I hear
you
you.
know, yeah,
I hear you, man. I've met like there are people that I've done gigs with that I'll never, I was like, oh my god, I'd never want to be around that
yeah,
person. And
yeah.
there are people who have never done gigs with them, but we've met in the scene, and you know, we're still friends to today. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
could totally relate to that.
Yeah.
But when we start looking at the landscape of your art, how do you see, you know, it changing for like people of color, right?
Yeah. I think, back to when I was mentioning about how much I like history, it's knowing that history that has served into how I understand the cultural landscape and how things change amongst people of color. Um, I do know the music industry is more diverse than it's ever been,
Yeah,
I would also say that because of my bubble that I live in New York, like I said, it is a very progressive bubble. Every band that I'm in now either has a person of color or a woman in it or a person of the LGBTQ plus community. That's just kind of the norm now. And you can go to any show and there's always going to be some representative in every single either the audience or in the band. And that's great for where I'm at. I just don't know how that looks like in the greater scope of everything. And I also do believe that there's a lot of I think that what was happening in the 80s, I'm not going to say any of that, but I would say that, we started off with the whole like race records things from like the 30s and the 40s,
yeah,
and then Motown came through and was just like, nah, black people can make pop music essentially. And then the 70s happened with a lot of different types of groups and it was still like segregated. 80s, a lot of crossover. Michael Jackson was a big deal for that, Prince too.
yep,
And then the 90s with hip hop came out, and I mean obviously hip hop happened in the 80s, but in the 90s it really became a big thing. But then with the birth of the internet and television, and the way that people showcased music just in our everyday lives, I feel like there's a slight reversion back to that race record type of thing because it is super easy to find your pockets and your communities on social media without actually knowing anything else.
yeah,
And I'm not saying that that is just what the record industry has done. I just think that that is kind of a thing that people have gotten used to. I still think there is a lot of crossover and there's a lot of diversity within that crossover. But I would say that I think we're at a moment right now where things are starting to get a little more I it's segregated, but I also like think about moments where, I'll be at a bar and, majority white people are in there and then, there's like a really popular hip hop song that comes on and they're all like dancing along and having a good ass time to
yeah,
it. But then at the same time, that half of them probably like voted for Trump, or something like that. And it's just like it's just kind of like I don't I'm having a hard time understanding what people enjoy now and why certain things work the way that they do. And my pessimistic brain is like, well, you're just fetishizing the black experience to your own to make yourself look cool, and that doesn't feel good as a black performer. So a lot of the times I try to be really intentional with how I talk about music and how I perform music, and that's just me looking from the outside because I don't really know those spaces a lot because the spaces that I'm in are actually like very positive and wholesome and stuff like that. But I see it every once in a while, in certain acts and just little minor quips that people will say to black performers, and it's just like, hey, yo, you can't. You might think that you're giving a compliment, but it's not.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
you're actually doing more harm than good by saying what it is that you just said. And also, a lot of times that happens to black women performers. They're getting a lot of catching a lot of strays a lot of the
yeah,
time, with them just being themselves, and you also got fucking Drake reposting what the hell's that dude's name? I always forget his name for a good reason. Uh, yeah, Tory Lanez or whatever. I mean, it's like dude shot Megan in the foot. I don't know why everybody's backing Tory Lanez, and it's just like I digress. Sorry, but
Yeah.
that is also a huge thing that is really bothering me right now is musicians not holding other musicians accountable, especially in diverse spheres, to just like be better people, and
Yeah.
that's a huge thing that I'm having a problem with right now. So
I feel that, man. So let's talk about your next artistic, aspiration that's
yeah,
coming.
you know how we talked about what is your obstacle?
Yep.
Me being my obstacle. So like I'm gonna tell you what my aspiration is, but I might prevent myself from doing it because it's really up to me.
Yeah.
I'm at a point in my career now where I can kind of just do whatever I want, which is really cool. And I know that like yes, I can wait for gigs to come through, but it's really up to me to just like do what it is that I want to do. So one thing that I really want to do is I have amassed a very large record collection in the last couple of years, and there's this website called Discogs where you can just put in your records and log them in. And I'm kind of doing a system of organizing them chronologically because like I said, I talked about history, and I just love the idea that I have records going from like 1911 to 2022, and it's just all in chronological order.
Wow.
And I'm like, "Oh, if I want something from 1972, I know exactly where it is because it's not by genre, because I love the idea that there's so many things happening in one single year.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that, like, that's just like I don't know, it makes my brain tickle in a wonderful way. So once I log all those in, then I'm gonna go through all the records again and take samples and like drums loops and things like that and create a whole sample library so that I can like write and produce for other people just with like the things that I have found. Um, which is also really exciting. So that's like an aspiration that I have. I also want to I want to start working and producing with a lot more people now. I have a studio that I have with that band Alto Palo, and I've learned how to like record my own drums. So just hit people up and be like, "Yo, you need some drums? I can record them," type of thing. And that's kind of been like a fun endeavor. I just have to figure out how I want to achieve that. Another aspiration, because I do have all these records, I also like to DJ my records. So, just going out to bars and being like, "Yo, do you need a DJ?" And they say, "Yeah," and then they don't ever hit me back because that's just how it usually goes. Um, and so, yeah, it's just a lot of random things. My main aspiration is wanting to be happy with the decisions that I'm making. That is my actual aspiration because I've kind of been at the uh, whim of people who have a lot of money that they can pay me, and then I'm like, "Oh, you're paying me, great, this is cool." But now I'm like, I kind of just want to enjoy music and existing and like being by myself and like creating things. So
Well,
that's my main aspiration, I would say.
that's good. That's good. So I mean that you certainly have the opportunity to do that, and
Mhm.
perhaps even the space. So, um, before we close,
Yes.
is there anything else you would want to like just share with the people who are listening to you at this point?
Anything that
Any
I'd like to
last
share?
things, go do this, go be that, be inspired
Uh,
by.
yeah, I would say, uh, um, yeah, everything's okay. That big of a deal. Everything is okay. Um, and things might seem stressful, but if you really just take a step back, it's pretty obvious as to like how things can get done. And it's obviously going to be stressful, but at the end of the day, as long as you have some community, it's going to be okay. Um, and yeah, fuck capitalism, free Palestine, free the Congo, all those wonderful good things. Those are also last words of mine as well.
All
Um,
right.
you know,
We'll take it. So, so hey, thank you for tuning into the KnolShare with Dr. Dave podcast. Just special thanks to Dillon Treacy for sharing so generously today. So I say, stay tuned, Trailblazers, and for the next episode. And you know what? I'm just gonna say it. The next episode is your mom. So
oh,
there you go.
sick,
There
wonderful,
you go.
love it.
There you go.
Getting the whole fam.
Doing the whole fam, brother.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thank you again. I'm gonna end our
Thanks
stream
for having me.
and
Appreciate it.
yeah.